Okay. Hi, Robert. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good. Thank you for coming on the show. Nice to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
So, you've got a book out called Elevate Your Team, and you are also founder and chairman of the board of Acceleration Partners, which is a marketing agency. Is that correct?
Yeah, we're a global partner marketing agency. We specialize in this area of digital marketing called affiliate and partner marketing.
I've done over 1,000 interviews on my podcast and this video show, and I've had several people that call themselves leadership coaches, and they talk about improving the quality of your business. And what is different about your approach to it?
Yeah. So I'm not necessarily a coach. I'm more of a practitioner helping to grow an organization from nothing to almost 300 people globally. What we did differently in that organization, Acceleration Partners, was somewhere along the line we realized that we could grow with our people. And so I think we kind of discovered this framework or put it together. I mean, nothing is really new, called capacity building, which I talk about in the book, which is how do we just make our people better, and how do we work on things that make them better, both inside and outside of work, and can we grow by kind of growing our people? And I think that playbook. I think could help a lot of other leaders and companies right now, because I think we've come to the end of the steroid growth era of businesses where it's just grow, grow, grow and break the people. And I think growth has almost become a bad word now. If you go to most people and you say we're going to grow 50% next year, they're like, oh, I don't want to do that. It didn't used to be like that, because that's because growth has just been so, again, sort of top line kind of cheap capital fused. And it's really, it's exhausted the people along the way rather than elevating a lot of them.
Well, does the Google model work where you have this sort of, I don't know, almost resort type atmosphere at work?
I think we're running. I mean, Google does some great things, and I think Google's kind of maybe an in between examples. There's an expression I heard that we're running into a perk session, where I think a lot of the other sort of Silicon Valley kind of, hey, this isn't a great place to work, but we've got donuts and yoga and espresso and
Right.
cafes and this whole thing, like that doesn't it doesn't necessarily. And sometimes that's almost to cover up a not good place to work. I think what makes people want to work in a place a long time is that they're learning and they're growing and they're kind of elevating in the organization and they have new opportunities. Not that there's unlimited lattes. I think we have confused the two, and I think a toxic culture right now, but having great perks is people are starting to see right through that.
Well, I liked your analogy of it being a cover up, because I think in some ways it is. No matter what you do, if the environment is toxic, people are just not going to be happy. The model used to be run like the military, where the CEO was the general, the vice presidents were the colonels, and the managers were the majors. That model has not been successful over time. I mean, it was sort of the only model that was out there
Yeah.
for many, many years. So give me an idea of what you're doing or what you're talking about doing to improve on the environment in a workplace.
Yeah, so I think we've gone through a couple iterations. So what you're talking about is a command and control, and even the military doesn't use that anymore. Stanley McChrystal's talked about that a lot, and I think he was like one of the people who tried to get it out of the military and said, if you get there, don't execute the order I gave you, execute the order I should have given you, and tried to get more decentralized decision making and team making and teams. And I think that's great, and that evolved. Again, that evolved same time though when we hit this 10 years of just kind of cheap capital, and it was about growing the organization. I mean, the best analogy I can give you is if NASA said, hey, we're going to put a shuttle on Mars, and they sent that shuttle to Mars with a crew, and it landed on Mars and everyone was dead. I don't think everyone would be standing up and down, like cheering, that the mission was a success. A lot of these companies have grown really, really unprofitably, and all the people are dead, over the last couple of years. So, in trying to combine all of these things, the model I talk about in the book is one sort of based on spiritual, intellectual, physical, and emotional capacity. How do we help our people figure out who they are and what they want, kind of focus on a culture of improvement and feedback, understand that people's physical and mental capacity is an important part of their ability to lead both inside and outside the organization, and then improve emotional capacity, which is how people relate to each other, psychological safety, vulnerability, and just build the team up and build the next group of leaders. The way that these companies have been built over the last 10 years is to keep swapping out it's like burn a crop of people out and bring in a new crop of people and burn out a new crop of people with 18-month turnover. You're just running out of people to play that game right now. And so I think doing this and then kind of investing in the people directly and focus on building the next level of leaders, you can build the organization on top of your people growing, not despite it.
Well, is your book and your approach to this exclusively for the management, or would you use this also for the labor force?
Yeah, I think it's not necessarily for the leadership team, but I think it's an approach for the entire organization of the people that are lead on how to build and grow their teams, and how to set goals and think about, again, what are we all growing together, and are we pushing the ball kind of uphill? So I don't know it's for necessarily Elevate. My first book, actually, it took the same principles and talked about it as a leader. How do I use these principles to become a better individual and contributor? This was sort of the sequel, and said, okay, well, how do I put a lot of people like that in terms of how do I get better? But then it was like, how do I take those same principles and put them in the organization? And that was the difference between Elevate and Elevate Your Team.
It says that you lead a fully remote team of over 270 people. What exactly do you guys do? Give me just a little bit of a background of your company.
Sure. So we actually have, I don't lead the team direct day to day anymore. Again, big chapter in the book on sort of succession, and I turned over the CEO role to my number two. But we have set up programs. Instead of companies buying a click or buying an impression, we help them partner with hundreds or thousands of partners whose activity is tracked. And so, if I got off this podcast and you made a note and said you can buy Bob's book and you link to Amazon, you could be a partner of Amazon and sign up to get a commission on selling that book. And Amazon's not going to pay you for advertising. They're not going to pay you for a click. They're not going to pay you for an impression, but they'll pay you a percentage of that sale. So about 20% of the things that are online that are sold go through partner or affiliate programs like this. It's a big ecosystem out there, although those who outside of it don't really see it because people don't want to make it super obvious. But there's no website out there that's writing recommendations or talking about products or elsewise that doesn't participate kind of in these programs. So we help build those programs, manage them, recruit hundreds, if not thousands of partners for kind of large global brands who run these programs.
So you said you stepped down as the CEO. Are you concentrating more of your efforts now on doing speaking engagements?
Yeah, so I've always been writing. The last couple of years while I was CEO, I wrote 4 different books. So I've continued doing the writing, and I'm actually doing a lot of stuff we talk about in terms of working on leadership development and training with our own people, kind of that next generation. So I'm chairman of the board. We've acquired 4 companies. So I'm working on the kind of strategy and people side of the business. And yeah, I'm spending more of my time doing some speaking and writing as well.
Okay. It says that everyone works remote. Were you working remote prior to COVID?
So we were working remote for 15 years before Zoom. Back when we worked with Fortune 500 companies, we kind of had to hide it because we didn't, we worked in these big companies on these big projects, and we didn't want them to what do you mean you don't have an office? And for years I had conversations with people and they said, well, it wouldn't work for our company and never work. And I said, look, we've built an organization around not necessarily remote work, but accountability and flexibility. It started out because we couldn't get the talent in our industry and we had to be flexible. And then COVID hit, and then we were getting asked all this stuff. And then I wrote a book on remote work because I got so frustrated watching all the academics come out, write books who hadn't actually ever done it before or been part of any organization
Yeah.
that was remote, kind of talking about what actually worked and what our experience had been doing this for almost 10 years.
Well, it's interesting because I've been working remote with my producer since 2007. And it was long before people started to embrace remote work. COVID sort of put it on the map, I think,
Yeah.
where people were forced to do remote. And then they realized, hey, we can save thousands a month without having to rent a space and just leave people at home. It
Yeah,
doesn't,
if your lease expired in March
yeah.
2020, you won the lottery.
Oh,
So
exactly. So, okay, well, I'm glad that that's working out. So the book, Elevate Your Team, is who's your target audience for this? Is it CEOs or just for everybody, or who is buying the book?
it's people that it's either the executive team. I think it's people leading the organization, or it's people that leading teams. Because look, most people leave a team, they join a company and they leave a team. So how that team is run and how their leader manages them will ultimately kind of determine that. So I found, yeah, the most interest is either, people who lead teams, or people kind of in the executive suite level.
Now, who are your clients for your speaking engagements? Do you get hired by big corporations to talk to the workforce?
Yeah, it tends to be a couple of things. It tends to be conferences, executive conferences with CEOs or executive leaders, either a leadership team retreat or kickoff, or if it's a larger company, it might be something for the sales team or some sort of kickoff. I wrote a book called Elevate and Elevate Your Team. A lot of people have a theme of Elevate for the year, so I end up speaking at a lot of those. If their theme is Elevate, I get calls for that.
The book is out now, Elevate Your Team.
Yeah, the book has been out for a couple months. It was number 2 on Barnes and Nobles a couple weeks back, so the momentum's still been going strong.
Okay, great. Do you have any plans to write another book?
I've already written my next book. I'm just deciding how and when I want to release it. It's a little bit different. It's sort of a parable in the Patrick Lencioni style. So I wanted to talk about in a bunch of my books. I talk about people on figuring out their personal core values, and particularly for leaders, like it's very hard to kind of lead authentically if you're not clear about what you value. People then ask me a lot about, okay, well, how do I do that? And I've given them a lot of resources. Eventually, I took some of that curriculum and turned it into a course that we did. But I wanted to sort of explain it out all to people, but felt it wouldn't be a fun book, and so I decided to do it through a storytelling lens of a parable.
But this one, Elevate Your Team, is it set up like a workbook, like a how-to, or is it stories, or how's it set up?
Yeah, it's set up. It goes through each of the 4 capacities, and it talks about, I think, the framework, and then it gives a lot of real world examples and things that leaders could go do tomorrow, right? So one example is about proving vulnerability and how do you get that in your team, and there is an example in there on what are, how do could you open your meetings differently tomorrow with your teams to get people kind of talking more about things that are going on and just open up a little more personally and kind of take the edge off in terms of being very business focused and serious. So again, each chapter has real stories, and it comes from the sense of a practitioner. Here are things that you can go do if you want to make those changes tomorrow or the next couple months in your business.
We're just about out of time, but I wanted to bring up one funny point about working remotely that I've had a
Yeah.
couple of other people say. They said that one of the benefits, aside from the obvious, what we just talked about, you don't have to rent space and it saves people commuting and all of that, is that it does sort of unintentionally bring your personal life or an aspect of your personal life into the office, in the sense that if you're on the computer and the camera's on, all of a sudden maybe your cat jumps up onto the
Yeah.
keyboard.
There were a lot of cats during Zoom.
Yeah, or your little
During COVID, I
kids.
mean, there were a lot of cats. Yeah.
Yeah, or your little kids run in with something, mommy, mommy, daddy, daddy. And, most people find it cute. They find it charming, and it kind of relaxes people a little bit, that you wouldn't have all of that sort of stiff formality that you would have in person.
Yeah, and I look, it's a balance, right? We all saw that video before COVID of the guy who sort of stiff-armed the the kids as they broke into the room when he was doing an interview, which then became everyone's Zoom. So yeah, I think that it's good for people. I mean, I don't. If one of my kids runs in, it's not the end of the world, but I'll say, hey, hold on. I think people are trying to balance kind of being human and having a professional life. We have always distinguished at our company between sort of external and internal calls. Like internal calls, like kids running around, you're in your yoga pants and you just got from the gym and you got a hat on, like totally fine. But like you're pitching a client and then you're not expected to be sitting in the kitchen with dirty dishes in the background. So I think it's just understanding sort of the norms. Again, we're not doing that to be performative, but I think again, if someone's hiring, a Fortune 500 company is hiring you for a big project, you want to sort of have the perception of being a little more professional. So I think people are navigating that. There was a lot of grace during COVID, but yeah, seeing their room or seeing someone's trophy on the wall or asking about it, I think it's nice to know the people we work with and understand kind of the context and the things that are important to them.
Yeah, you got to have all those bowling trophies behind you. That's an absolute must.
You might as well have something that's a good talking point right behind you. So.
Well, Robert, we got to wind this down. Thank you so much for coming on. My guest is Robert Glazer. The book is called Elevate Your Team. Last question, do you have a website that you want to give out?
Sure. My website is robertglazer.com. So books are on there, speaking, and I have a newsletter called Friday Forward. It's a short little blurb. About 100,000 people in 150 countries get every Friday.
Okay, great. Well, it was nice meeting you. Thanks again for coming on the show. Best of luck with the book and everything you're doing.
Thanks for having me.